Immediately after finishing The Killer Is Loose, director Bud Boetticher began directing a series of westerns that would comprise his cinematic legacy. Most of them were photographed by Lucien Ballard and starred Randolph Scott. In several of them, Scott plays a lonesome gunslinger out to avenge the murder of his wife. So in some ways, The Killer Is Loose has a thematic connection to those more famous films, especially Boetticher's next one, 7 Men from Now. The stories take place 100 years apart, and Wendell Corey is certainly no Randolph Scott Western hero, which is clearly the point. Instead of a self-reliant cowboy roaming the new frontier, Leon Poole is a civilized suburban sad sack who should never have been conscripted and taught to kill. He returns from the war shell-shocked, and only his wife offers him a tenuous chance at normalcy. Once she's killed, Foggy employs the skills he learned in the military to avenge her death. He's so devoted to his dead wife that in the end he symbolically becomes her to complete his mission. Wendell Corey had enjoyed a good run in pictures from his debut in 1947. He made quite a few film noirs, including I Walk Alone, Sorry Wrong Number, The Accused, and The File on Thelma Jordan. But I think this is his best performance, as he convincingly veers between childlike vulnerability and ice-cold psychopathy. Corey worked steadily in the 50s, but his interest increasingly turned to politics and drinking. He was the president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences from 1961 to 63 and used a Santa Monica City Council seat as a springboard into California politics, following in the footsteps of Ronald Reagan. But Corey lost his bid for a Republican congressional seat in 1966, and 2 years later, at only 54, he died of liver failure brought on by acute alcoholism. By the way, Foggy's wife was played by Martha Crawford, one of the few acting roles for the veteran stunt woman. She knew Bud Boetticher well because they belonged to the same Hollywood writing club. Ironically, for a woman who appeared as a stunt writer in dozens of westerns, this was the only time she worked with Boetticher, and he gave her one of the few character roles in her career. More than 20 years ago, I showed The Killer Is Loose at one of my first film noir festivals, and Bud Boetticher and Rhonda Fleming were kind enough to appear for a post-film discussion. Rhonda was proud of her performance because the queen of Technicolor rarely got a chance to play an unglamorous role. Bud joked that one of the hardest things he'd ever done as a director was trying to make Rhonda look like a normal housewife. It was quite a reunion for the pair, and Bud definitely lived up to his reputation as a ladies' man, flirting with the still ravishing Rhonda to the point where we wondered if we were going to have to get them a hotel room. Bud said that one of the reasons he jumped at the chance to direct this film was to work with Joseph Cotten, whom he'd admired as an actor and wanted to know better. He said Cotten was a consummate pro, but watching the movie more than 45 years later, Bud found his performance chilly and remote, something he hadn't realized during the 2-week production. If Cotten and Fleming seem a little mismatched as spouses, it may have something to do with the almost 20-year age difference between them. Rhonda is good in this film. Her character is interesting because even though she's the intended victim, she's not particularly sympathetic. Lila Wagner tends to divide audiences. Is she sticking up for herself and rightfully trying to protect her marriage, or is she a harridan who's emasculating her husband? You can, of course, let us know what you think by weighing in on the Noir Alley Facebook page or Twitter feed. Next week, I'll be presenting a B film made at Columbia in 1945, directed by one of Bud Boetticher's studio stablemates, Joseph H. Lewis. My Name is Julia Ross is the first film that gained Lewis notices as an up-and-coming director capable of making strong films on shoestring budgets. Nina Foch, George McCready, and Dame Mae Whitty star in a spooky tale of psychological suspense. Until next week, I'll see you in the shadows.